I just wanted to give a quick explanation as to why we load things and not stretch them. One, I tell patients, look, you've been stretching the tight side a lot. Stretch is just a perception. It is not an indication of length. When an area is guarded, there's often increased tension. So trying to stretch it increases that feeling or perception of a stretch. The more you increase that perception of a stretch, the more the brain gives a red light, and it doesn't really give a green light. Just like if you've ever been stretched by a coach, or for me, a martial arts master, you get into the end of a split or you get to the end of your hamstrings and they push more. No one likes to get pushed, even when they're not in pain, into the feeling of a stretch. So if a muscle is already tense, it's like taking a string or a towel or whatever you have, you piece of clothing or latex. If it's already taut and you pull it more taut with the intention of loosening it, that doesn't really work out. So I also like to use finger traps, right? The more you pull, the tighter it gets. And again, it feeds into that negative feedback loop. The more of a feeling of a stretch you have, the muscle either has to fatigue first before it loosens up, which by loosens up, I mean relaxing. But the more you increase that, then you're feeding into a negative feedback loop of increased perception of stretch, red light, further decrease of pain and movement thresholds, and potentially increased tone. So again, instead of stretching something that feels tight and is under threat, let's try slacking it. And slacking would be for the tissues and loading would be for the joints. The other part is that it's also a novel strategy. If you haven't already tried it, the majority of people you go to, your right side of your neck is tight, your right side of your back, or your SI, your hip is tight. All you ever do is do a figure four stretch for your back, or you always try to stretch your upper traps. You've done that a lot. Then you go to a massage therapist who says you have trigger points. You go to someone who does ART. They do a ton of tendon stretching. If it works, great. Chances are you've already stretched it yourself. Any of the therapists, traditional massage therapist or traditional manual therapist, they've already unloaded and stretched it a ton of times. If it was going to work by now, it would have worked. So the best strategies are novel strategies, novel non-threatening strategies that don't feed into that negative feedback loop. So let's try slacking it and see if that helps. Those are some quick ways that I use to describe why we're slacking or loading structures as opposed to stretching them.